Presentation about YogaGnosis.
YogaGnosis.
We'll find out what that is. So we're going to have our few-minute meditation with Bobby leading it, and then he will introduce himself.
You will interrupt the
Come on up, Bobby.
speaker if you run over on the meditation.
Okay, I'll try to keep it nice and concise.
Well, we'll
Just a little
we'll be
last
standing
minute,
up
little
when the
last
time
minute
is.
coaching.
Hi, Bobby.
Hi, Laurel. Hi, Louie. Hello, everyone. Wonderful to see a full house. Everybody earlier was like encouraging me not to take it personally if nobody came.
Well, because at
9:30 there was like 6
there's
people here.
Yeah, and then I'm going like, where is everybody? And then they magically show up.
So,
Leave you alone.
So yesterday was our 10th anniversary of the National Guild of Hypnotists, and we had a celebration there. And one of the things that we did as an exercise was look back at what are some of the talks that we've had along the way that have been most memorable to you in the 10 years of the National Guild of Hypnotists. And I thought that would be a really cool talking circle for us the next time a talking circle comes up, to think back about who is a speaker that delivered a message that had a dramatic impact on you. And now as I'm about to share mine, I'm a little embarrassed because I can't remember the guy's name. Dawn, it's the real estate dude that runs the weekly article and came.
David Windsor. Yes.
David Windsor. Okay, so I was thinking about that this morning with Adam, and David Windsor came to mind. And if you remember, he started his talk off talking about going on a hike with somebody from the Latter-day Saints church. And they started to go and kind of talk philosophically. And David, I think, is much more of an Adam type person. Just whatever resonates, whatever works. And this guy was giving some doctrine from the Mormon church. And the thing that I remember about David Windsor is he described, he's walking along and he says, and I turned and I said, on whose authority do you accept these teachings? And he did it with that emphasis of like, wow. But that had an impact on me, a dramatic impact on me, because it made me wonder, on whose authority have I accepted any of these teachings? And the thing that I think is beautiful about Adam, I think I told the story right before when Lance was coming to talk the last time on Easter. We had somebody that posted on Facebook that said, oh, you guys celebrate Easter just like the Christians? And when I saw that, that comes across my feed, and I saw that, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. They must think that we're kind of like pagans or something, that we don't necessarily believe in that stuff. So I wrote a thing back, and what I wrote back was, we accept, Adam stands for the ancient teachings of the masters. And we love all of the masters, and Jesus is one of our favorites. And I put that on there, and then it just kind of popped up. I guess she kind of liked that, she commented on that, gave me a little thumbs up. And that brought me back there, and I reread what I said, and then I went to her Facebook post, and she's got tattoos all up and down her neck of stars and pentagrams and all of this other stuff. And I thought, oh, that's not what she was asking at all. So it got me thinking about kind of, what is it that we believe, on whose authority have we accepted this as a belief and started following this along. And I had the opportunity to speak at the Whole Life Festival, and Cindy says, what's going to be the title of your presentation? And I said, I don't know, I'll get back to you. So I just did a quick meditation, and for the first time in my life, well, that's not true either. Interesting. Not the first time in my life. First time in my life in this context, the phrase YogaGnosis came up. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about YogaGnosis, but I think it would be more interesting to experience it. So Richard, thank you for continuing to play. I'm going to ask you to do it for another 5 minutes or so. Because I want to do a guided meditation, and I want this to be the experience of heaven for you. So kind of he's fine, he's good. He's good. So I want us to just, through a guided visualization, go and explore our concept of heaven, and then that's going to kind of play into our talk that we have here. So take a couple of deep breaths and just close your eyes. This experience is done more easily and effortlessly with our eyes closed, because then we're tapping into our imagination, which some people have called the greatest special effects department on the planet, the theater of our mind. And I want you just to imagine that suddenly something has happened and we're all dead. Life on this plane is over for all of us. And as you breathe deep, just imagine what would be releasing. You're no longer living on this plane. You have clear evidence now that there is an afterlife because you are experiencing it. And as you breathe in again, just feel that little tug up. And that little tug up tells us, oh, good, we're going to the good place. If there is actually a couple of places. And just imagine what that experience would be like. In fact, don't even imagine it. Just get rid of any expectations. Let them go and just see what unfolds for you in this moment. Bright lights, perhaps, and a feeling that we're being pulled toward it. And it may be for some of you, when I play around with this energy and this experience, very often the first thing that I see is people that have passed, and now we're reunited. And just feel what changes are happening in your body, what changes are happening in your mind. Are a lot of these earthly things that we worry about just beginning to gently melt away, and they're no longer a concern. And in the absence of that worry, in the absence of that threat, what arises within you in this moment? And if you're seeing people from this plane that are coming to greet you, and there's hugs going on and energy exchange and talks of how much I've missed you, and we naturally begin telling our story, because that's what we're conditioned to do. Share our story about everything that happened. Oh my God, life was so tough when you were gone, but there were good parts, and there was this. And these folks now, angels, already having experienced the afterlife for a while, just say, shh, haven't missed a beat. I've been with you this whole time. And I know there's been moments that you felt me, because I could see that sense of recognition in your mind, in your body, in your spirit. I could tell that you were sensing me there. And just imagine what heaven is like for you. What are you noticing? You can hear the bowls. I'm sure Skookums is going to be there playing the harp. And now in this moment of deep, pure bliss, how long do you think it might be before you're starting to think, like a little excitement, like a little something different? Who I need to talk to get a hall pass, a weekend pass to hell, just so I can gamble and dance and do all of that stuff? Or is all of that in your heaven? What And then out of the corner of your mind, I want you to just see somebody that you kind of know from your past. Not a deep friend necessarily. Might just be an acquaintance. And you see them come back into being and you think, oh, they must have just passed away. Oh, that's interesting. And you go over and talk to them and they say, no, I went back down. I went back down to have another experience on earth. It was amazing because this time I did it. Understanding that we are spirit having a human experience. So when you're ready, taking a nice, deep, energizing breath, feel the oxygen start to spread through your body. That's a little meditation that I've started doing on the new moon. I find it's just an interesting thing to release, relax, and reset. So, Adam is the ancient teachings of the masters. And I've always been interested in various religions, and I think part of it was wanting to poke holes in Christianity, because my mom was such a devout Catholic, and I was an inquisitive kid, and I had lots of questions. And after a while, my mom kind of ran out of answers, because, I was getting a little bit too good. So that's when it came at arguing, and now we can. And so I was interested in what other religions teach, just to see if I thought that was better than Christianity, or we somehow devalue Christianity, so I didn't have to believe that because I had found something better. So that was kind of like a little quest that I was on for a long time. And my experience in meditation, I studied Buddhism and Hinduism, and there were lots of things that I really liked and resonated about that. But actually, since coming here, and maybe a little bit before, I probably started this a little bit before I started coming here, I started to notice all of the similarities in all of the teachings, and that there's really one message. And I read a few years ago, I can't remember, I think it might have been Margaret Mead, but I'm not 100% sure, some anthropologist who wrote that there has never been a civilization of people, even a small little tribe out in a remote jungle someplace. There's never been a civilization that didn't believe in a higher power in some form or some fashion. And in that article, they suggested that we need God. And if God doesn't exist, in our creative imagination, we would build it up. But I don't believe that's the case. And I'm going to offer a different concept around that during our talk today. But before we do that, I want to hear what heaven was like for you guys. What was that experience of going through the afterlife?
Complete freedom and unattachment. It was like everything is okay.
No responsibility.
Right? Yeah, no responsibility,
Nothing to worry about.
nothing to worry about.
Nice. What else?
I was struggling a little bit with some of the terminology because it's very much religious dogma behind that, like going up to heaven.
Yeah.
That startled me. I was like, well, I'm not sure I'm going up anywhere. and the concept of hell. So when we look at, because you're saying you're poking holes in Christianity, a lot of that, and I'm not saying that other religions don't, but some don't. So that also feeds that Christian dogma ingrained in whatever you were born into.
Yeah, I agree, and I like that. And I like the fact that you brought that up. I liked it the other day.
I'm not criticizing.
I understand that.
My experience.
And I liked it the other day when somebody was speaking, I can't remember who, and they were adding on a whole bunch of things, and you raised your hand and said, why isn't this just enough? And we're going to revisit that. So I'm sorry that pulled you out, but I'm glad that you shared that, because when we're doing something like this with however many, we got 25 people here, it's hard to do it neutral enough that it's not going to affect some people in a very positive way, and some people it's going to kind of pull it out, and you know, it's like, God, stop talking, I was having such a wonderful experience.
I kind of second what Don said about freedom, but I also felt like a sense of like almost overwhelming love and reunion. Yeah, just freedom, and then it just kind of took me to the stars, back to the earth, and I was feeling like I was with my people and able to like float over the beautiful coastlines, and you know, it was just a really beautiful experience.
So freedom, free from worry, overwhelming experience of love everywhere. What else can we add to the
Reunion.
cocktail? Reunion. That was a good word. Thank you for emphasizing that. What else showed up?
One other thing too, Bobby, it may be a little weird. I couldn't find anybody that I was, like when you said to bring in people that you were excited to see again, there was.
Nobody showed up?
No, I couldn't find anybody. I was like, okay, I get to be my. I don't know if anyone else, but there wasn't anyone that I was like, oh
So
my
you're
God.
hanging out with the wrong crowd?
Maybe. Like I didn't have any that really missing anybody undyingly. Maybe one of my labs, you know, that died. Which is I'm serious. No, I mean that's just.
That was your experience, and I've done this probably 7 or 8 times. You know, just done this for myself, and I have a different experience every time that I've done that. So that's just what showed up for you this time. But isn't it interesting that there was like, it seemed like in you that there was like, that it felt like this was something that I had to admit.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
did I do it
Yeah,
right?
I
I
really
didn't
did.
see anybody. And so that kind of brings it back, that idea of, am I doing this right? Or that idea of, you know, this isn't working for me because of X, Y, and Z. That's our relationship with the moment. And this, I think, is one of the ancient teachings of the masters that is worth reconsidering a little bit. I'm not going to ask you to adopt it, but I am going to ask you to play around with just some core concepts. So YogaGnosis, the way that came about as a title, yoga, as you guys probably all know, means union with the divine. Doesn't have anything to do with the postures or the exercises. That's one of 8 limbs of yoga, and in that, we are, anybody that's doing yoga, is just being with yourself and removing whatever is standing between you and the divine. And if you look at the different religions, Buddhism, what did the Buddha do when he got enlightened? Right before he got enlightened, he was working with 5 aesthetics. You guys know that. The aesthetics are the ones that will stand there with their arms like this until they can't move their arms. And that's how they're trying to find union with the divine. And the Buddha was going around with all those people, and he's like, none of this works. None of this is all BS. And he just went and he sat beneath the Bodhi tree and he meditated. And he said, I'm just going to sit here till I get this. And he did. And depending on what story you read, it took him somewhere between 3 and 40 days to get that enlightenment. And then the moment that those aesthetics saw him again, they realized something had happened. They could see the light had gone on inside of him, and they're like, what is this? And he sat down and he started teaching. And he taught the 4 Noble Truths. And the 4 Noble Truths are, number 1, life on earth, the human experience, includes suffering. The reason that it includes suffering is because we cling. because we've got mind games that are going on all the time. So Amarissa says, this is Christian, thoughts. It's just thoughts, not good nor bad. It's just thoughts. Dawn sees nobody, not good nor bad. It's just thoughts. So we have what's happening, and we have our relationship to what's happening. And what the Buddha taught was clinging is the cause of all of our suffering. Just look at yourself as you're going through daily life. How often your mental bandwidth is used up with, this would be a little bit better if. This was nice, but it would be a little bit nicer if. If we stay in paint with Selena, we're going to be proud of our work. And we're going to sit there and look at it and say, it would be a little bit better if. And my question for you is, do you think that's natural, or do you think that's conditioned into you?
Conditioned.
We all agree that, right? Okay, so is it worthwhile to explore that conditioning? That's what the Buddha taught. Lao Tzu was the keeper of the ancient wisdom in the Chinese Taoist system, but China got into a bunch of turmoil, and he said, man, I need to bust a move out of here. And off he went, and he got to the gate, the end of the kingdom, and they're like, where are you going? And he's like, I don't know if you know, but man, Beijing or Peking or whatever, it's about to go into a meltdown. I'm out of here. And the guard said, okay, you can leave, but you got to write down all of your knowledge. We don't need you anymore, but we do need your knowledge. And the book that he wrote was the Tao Te Ching. And the Tao Te Ching was the way to experience heaven on earth. And one of the very first lines of a book about the Tao Te Ching begins, the great way is easy for those who have no preferences. But can we have no preferences? Jesus taught the same thing. When he was first beginning to talk about heaven, and all of the disciples were like, where is it? What is it? What is it like? You guys know what his response was?
Be like a child?
Ooh. What's that?
Well, I'm sorry. That was maybe from a different spot.
Yeah, but I like that. I'm glad you said that. I think that is from a different spot. But
What did he say?
to be like a child. What is heaven like? To be like a child. I think that's exactly what it's like.
The talents, the talents, the kingdom of heaven is like a man gave 10 talents to so and so and so and so, and when he came back and the servants hadn't used them, they buried them in the earth, and the others had taken them and grown them. And then he said, you silly fools, you should have taken your talent and at least put them with the banker. You could have gotten money. You could
Yeah,
have earned
put them to work. That's a beautiful parallel. Parable, that's not the one I'm looking for. The one that I'm looking for, if you have people coming up and talking to you, this is a good one to know, because it begins an interesting conversation like the Latter-day Saints. If they come walking up to your house, the Bible verse is Luke 17:21, which says, don't look out there or then for heaven. Don't wait for heaven. It's not over there. It's not something that you get. And you know what the second part of that line is?
for the kingdom of
The
heaven.
kingdom is within you.
The kingdom of heaven was within you. So in YogaGnosis, one of the questions that I ask is, what if that's true? That the kingdom of heaven is not something that we earn. It's not something that we get to. It's not an achievement that we have. It's something that's already in us. So I want to go back to what Jillian talked about. And I just want to sit down. I don't like the feeling that I'm lecturing. I'd rather have a chat. Yes, it's still good, isn't it? Thank you for checking. So this idea that the kingdom of heaven is within us. And he does talk about that you have to have the eyes of a child to be able to see heaven. I think that was the verse that you were going for. He told us that the kingdom of heaven is within us. And he told us the way to find heaven is by having the eyes of a child, of being childlike, of seeing everything for the first time. So I want you to think of a little child that has been in your life. Might be yours, might be a niece or nephew or just a friend. And think about them from 0 to 2. So where are we before we come to earth? Are we in that stress-free, judgment-free, overwhelming love part of heaven? And then is there a decision? There's a lot of concepts, a lot of schools of thought that think we make contracts, the idea of soul contracts. We come into this life, and I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's interesting as part of the conversation. Think about those little kids. What is life like for a child? What does Jesus mean, or any great teacher mean, when he talks about seeing the world through the eyes of a child?
For me, it means losing all of what we gain after that age. After 2 years old, we gain that conditioning. We gain the worldness. We gain all of the crap out there that keeps us from that. And to me, that's what that means. If we're to truly understand and to get to that place, we have to be like that mind of the child prior to 2 years old.
I like that. You got another?
There's like a sense of freshness and wonder when you are perceiving or looking at something. Like I remember the first time I saw a fountain and I didn't know what it was, and I was like, wow, this is like
magic.
Yeah. Like this is like singing water. What is it? I don't know.
And one of the things that we learned yesterday is it's not actually magic, but it is magical. It's magical. Everything is magical. If you think of a little kid, they're making their way through the world, checking things when they get a piece of paper, they want to taste it and crinkle it and rub it against their skin and try to tear it. And they may fall down and that may get them to cry, but they cry for a second and then they bounce back up, licking it and just doing full sensory experience, full of wonder in every moment. And think about how, like during those first 2 years, the adults around those kids are. I think people, unless you're somebody who's wired not to particularly like babies, babies are one of the most hypnotic things on the planet. I've seen people go walking. When I had my little kids and I would go to the mall and walk them, I've seen people going down having these intense conversations, and they come across my daughter. She had these long curly hair, and whatever they were doing, it was like they walked onto an elevator. You know how people, when they're talking, they get on the elevator, they just stop and they look up, and then the doors open again and they pick right up where they left off. That's the way these folks were. It was like the massive pattern interrupt of interrupts. It's just like, and it's beautiful. And that's all the kids experience. Love and support and beauty. And then what happens around 2?
Start breaking everything.
They start breaking
You
everything.
realize that you're separate.
Start to realize that you're separate. How does that happen?
Mind,
Comparison.
Mind, comparison. Yeah, but before that, like what's happening right around 2? We've learned how to walk.
Independence.
When's that first word come?
No.
Usually around 20 months.
No.
No? Yeah. You know, what is the first word that we typically learn? I know for my wife and I, it was like a contest to see if it was going to be mommy or daddy. You know, mommy, daddy, 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 daddy. Practice it with me, daddy, daddy. And then all of a sudden, boom, they learn it. Mama, And then so we learn, you're mama, I'm Bobby. And we get this idea of separation. And what else happens with language right around that same time the kids are learning? What's the first thing that parents start to think when the kids start to learn words? I know for me, I mean, I was right there. I was like, thank God, now the training can begin.
Yeah, you think that this is better, this is an improvement, this is.
Right. And so all of a sudden we learn the concept of separation. We learn that we're supposed to think about certain things. We learn that certain of our actions are good and others are bad. We learn that some things are going to make mommy and daddy so happy that they're going to come up and snuggle, and then there's going to be other times that they're going to, what was I thinking? I didn't want to bring another kid in the world. All of that energy can be picked up by those little kids. So we start to learn values, we start to learn judgment, we start to learn hierarchies, we start to learn good and bad, and we start to learn the idea of separation. And off we go. It's what the Four Agreements calls the domestication process. I used to call it the hypnosis, I still do, the hypnosis of social conditioning. That it's not us, it's our conditioning. So I think 100% of the people, when I said, what is it? And conditioning, everybody's like, yeah. You know, we've got agreement that certain beliefs have been conditioned into us. And I have a gift now every time that I start to realize that that's a conditioned belief that I've just accepted. I've got Dave Windsor in my mind. On whose authority? And when you start to ask that question over and over again, you begin to see that there's a whole lot of shit we believe that we have absolutely no basis in reality or experience. Mark Twain said, I spent most of my life worrying about things, 99.5% of which never happened. We're good at that. It's a superpower. It's the reason that while we have no spectacular physical attributes other than long distance middle running, we dominate the planet. We are the only animal that lives on every continent on Earth because of our ability to pick patterns and recognize things and think things out and conceive and imagine. And all of those things, they're superpowers. And I believe they're also blinding us to the teachings of Lao Tzu and Buddha and Jesus, that heaven on earth is here and it's right now. So the question can become, well, so how do we get there? And I'm just going to invite you to play around for the next 24 hours with the idea of your relationship with the present moment. And just see how that is. For example, I'm giving one presentation, but this presentation is being filtered through 30 perceptual filters. And little things like going up, that's passing through a filter. Little things like who do you see, that's passing through a filter. And just begin to play with that and notice what it is that you are experiencing and what you're feeling about it. And then start to pull on that thread and see, where did this belief come from? Why do I believe that? And I'm going to suggest to you, I remember this morning, the very first stage hypnosis show that I did, I got introduced, And one of the things that I had read is you gotta have a big start, because they remember the beginning and they remember the end. So those two have got to be strong. So my speech was, or not my speech, my little talk, this was in Las Vegas, welcome Las Vegas. Are you ready to journey into your unconscious mind? Truly the final frontier. And if we can get back to what Jillian talked about, of that sense of awe and that sense of wonder, this is riding the light fantastic and just beginning to notice what it is. And you're very quickly, if you play around with this, for some of you it'll only take a day to play around with this, you'll see one thing very quickly, that you're never upset about life. Life happens, and you will notice many things that happen to you that are like waters off of a duck's back. And you'll notice many things that happen to you that really are quite sticky, that you hang on to those thoughts. And as you begin to pull that thread, and you begin to realize it's not life that is like messing me up. It's not life that's giving me these feelings. It's my thinking about what's happening. And for some of us, there's a voice inside of our heads that seems to never shut the F up. STFU, wear a shoe when you need them. That voice inside our head. And you begin to realize that our feelings are not telling us about our circumstances. That's domestication. That's conditioning. And think about it. Even our parents who are a little bit more enlightened and know that they don't want to criticize the individual, they want to criticize the action. That's kind of like enlightened parenting these days. It's not that you're a bad boy, you're a good boy. But that behavior, that no good. And on one level that's good, because I'm not internalizing with this sponge that I'm a bad person, but I'm recognizing there are some bad actions. And I'm starting to judge. And all of a sudden I'm starting to notice the interactions that we have with other people. And with those interactions, sometimes I say things that don't go over so good. Okay, that happens. That's life. And then there's how are we reacting to that? What you're very quickly going to notice is that your feelings are not telling you about your circumstances. Your feelings are telling you about your connection with the divine. It's all they're ever doing. That's a concept. So I'm not asking you to believe it because I say it. I'm asking you to check it out and see if in your experience, this is true. And that's the Gnosis. The Gnostics, one of the things that they believed is only what they could verify through their direct experience. So I'm just going to invite you to play around with that. But the next time, if you feel yourself getting upset and you feel yourself getting anxious or angry or not enough, or just anything that we typically would classify as a negative emotion. And there's a school of thought that there's really only two emotions. There's love and fear. And everything else is like a subset of love and fear. So in that school of thought, they think, well, the fear-based emotions are the negative emotions, that they're not good, that those are the ones that we try to tamp down. Got a little nervous before my speech today, and just recognize those are the butterflies, and they come every time that I have to deliver a message. They're the ones that send it out. And now, that's just a mind trick. I'm just conditioned to, oh, good. and the butterflies are here, that means the message is going to be well received. So it's not telling us about our circumstances. And this you can verify with pretty much anything. I use the example often because many people can relate to it, of commuting, of being in a car and somebody pulls in front of you. And when you're quote unquote in a very high state of mind, you're in union with the divine, you say, come on in, friend. Other soul, too stressed out, take my spot. It's all yours. And we can feel good about ourselves, and we can feel good that we helped somebody, and life is blissful. We're not going anywhere. Traffic is still, there. And then the same person in the same car, traveling down the same road, surrounded by more or less the same people, at the same time, another person pulls in front of us. And there are those days where you want to reach under your seat, pull out the gun. Full-blown road rage. What's the difference between those two experiences? And those are dramatic, obviously.
One will change your life forever.
Perhaps both of them will, if you dig a little bit deeper. You're right, yeah, one will definitely change your life forever. So we've been conditioned, hey, those aren't the rules. We got to play within the rules. That we've got to tamp down. So we've got to tamp down those emotions. But, that's in every one of us. One of the best posts, most liked posts I ever put was a little thing that said, inside of me is the angel who lets the car pass because maybe they're just having a rough day. And in here also is nice signal, F-bomb face. And that's all in there. We are, our reaction in any given moment, we are standing at the precipice of the field of all possibilities. We could do anything. High probability we're going to do a certain thing, and it's going to be the thing that we've been conditioned to believe. So if our feelings are not telling us about our circumstances, if you'll play with that concept just a little bit to see how it fits, try it on for size. If it's telling us about that, yes, sir.
You should remember that other driver is in a hurry to get to an accident, so give him
I heard a joke like that guy's riding on a plane and suddenly the engine gets on fire, and little nervous kid looks over and goes, hey, mister, that engine's on fire. And he goes, yeah, it is. And he goes, how far do you think we're going to be able to fly with our engine on fire? And he said, all the way to the scene of the accident.
There's another way to look at that. When that engine catches on fire, you hope the other one doesn't catch on fire because you'll be up there all day.
Or not.
If one engine catches on fire, you're delayed for about an hour. If the other one catches on fire, you're obviously going to be up there longer.
Okay.
I'll get that one.
A rare Phil joke that no one gets.
We got it.
I'll explain it to you in detail later. Slow crowd today.
Slow crowd today.
I just had a comment too, and Bubby, is that, just what you said, you never understand what another person's going through.
Yeah.
Ever. You don't know what.
Yeah,
they're-
and we'll get to that. Because that is, I think, one of the signals that we are in a high frame of mind, that our union is good. And I don't think, again, this is just my own philosophy, I don't think that we ever can become disconnected from God. I think that's there, that all we can ever do is pull the veil in front of the idea of God. And I'm thinking about this presentation, I've been playing around with an idea of, if you think about heaven and just love and bliss and joy and everything, how long do you think it would be before you're like, I want to do something? Let's shake things up a little bit. I mean, this is nice, but it's kind of like you'd want a hall pass, to be able to go to explore. And this is just wonderings. This isn't anything. But I wonder if that idea of the soul compact, if you were to come down and have a really rough life, but recognize that union with God is something, that union with the divine, with spirit, with natural law, with whatever we want to call source, that union with source can never be broken. Might be kind of, I'm very competitive naturally, and I can imagine angels coming down and like, dude, this time I was murdered and I was raped and I was just dragged through the streets and it was awful, but the whole time it was just like one with God. And you could get almost a competitive nature to see how bad can you make life be. That would be the thing that you brag about in heaven.
How would you know how good it can be if you don't know how bad it can be?
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because humans do that even in our day. If you've got something going on, there's somebody go, oh, well, you will not believe it. I got this going.
I don't know if that's conditioning or how we're wired, but it's been fun to kind of play around with and just try to see. So one of the things that I would invite you to do is have some sort of an interrupt where you can check in with yourself on a regular basis. It could just be, and it will become, actually, if you play around with this, I've done this with over 100 people, taken them through this process. And there is a point somewhere along the process where feeling good and feeling comfortable and feeling blissful, kind of those same things that we described of what heaven would be like, is our static state. And all of a sudden, these negative emotions that we experience, they start to become like rumble strips on the highway of life, and they become a pattern interrupt. And what ends up happening is you experience a little anxiety. A little anxiety pops up and you start to say, what's going on? And David Windsor kicks into your mind, on whose authority do you believe? And you start to pull on that thread a little bit. And one of the things from the 4 agreements, one of the 4 agreements is don't make assumptions. And I was thinking about that when I was reading it most recently. And I thought that one that Dawn brought up is the one assumption that we can make feeling good. Just the assumption that there's no way that I could know what it is that this person is going through right now. So here's just a couple of things to play with while I have the last little bit of time here. Check and see where you are on a regular basis during the day. You already know that you can control that. We do that every time we go into meditation. I mean, think about full moon meditation is so cool to me because we go from pretty massive uptime. We're with people that we like, we're eating food, we're chatting, we're catching up, we're shifting little areas that we sit so we can catch up with the people that we haven't seen for a while. And, there's a lot of energy. And I don't know about you guys, but man, on that full moon meditation, I go down through the floor like that. And we have the ability to control that with our breath anytime that we want to. It's the easiest thing to do because it's the easiest bodily function that we can turn totally over to automatic. We breathe, here's some interesting statistics, roughly 15 to 16 breaths per minute on average. As soon as you start to count, it immediately becomes slower. So you'll see, you'll just automatically take conscious control of your breath and start breathing a little bit more deeply. And this is like, to me, the greatest power tool, because what's going to happen is you'll begin to notice a certain sense of agitation. You'll start to tune into that. You'll start to say, how am I doing on the inside right now? And if you check in and it's good, go about your day. If you check in and say, a little uncomfortable, get up and do something else. I'm reading a book about long distance running. I don't think that I'll ever put the book to use, but I'm enjoying reading about it. And one of the things that I have adopted from that is the concept of movement snacks. So I have like little alarms and little cues all around my office. One of the things that I'll get up and do is just take a little movement snack. And it's amazing how if you're in any type of a stuck state where you're just, an emotion is holding you and there's a thought that you can't get rid of, you're just feeling weird, just moving starts to get things shifting. It starts to get the prana moving. It starts to get the lymph moving. And very quickly, you're a whole new person. We breathe in 22,000 gallons of air every day.
Great, now the city's gonna tax us on that.
Well, they can tax us more because, we've been going at this a little over an hour. So we've made roughly about 8 billion new red blood cells. 7.5 billion every hour. So not only is the only thing that we're looking for change. People come and say, I'm afraid of change. I'm like, man, change is all you want. Every action that you do all day, every day is to change something. Anything, if things don't need to be changed, some people just like to rearrange the furniture just to see how that would be. It's new energy and it's freeing things up. And as we begin to get more aware of what's going on with us, if we can create the union in ourselves, that we're always looking and seeing, where am I right now? And if you don't like the answer that you get back, just, if it's safe to do so, close your eyes and start breathing more deeply. Because the second that you breathe more deeply and exhale more deeply, you're triggering your vagus nerve, which is the vagus nerve that lets us know that we're safe and we feel good and we're comfortable. And just by breathing in for 1 and breathing out for 2, whatever your in is, so if your in's 10, your out's gonna be, if your in's 5, your out will be 10. That triggers your vagus nerve and starts to get your inner pharmacist up and say, okay, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, they're feeling good and changing your experience. And then when we interact, if we can use Dawn's little mantra, let that be a voice inside our head as well, that we never know what else is going on. And here's an assumption that I like, even though I do like the idea of not assuming and not judging. The assumption that everyone is always doing the very best they can in the moment with the access to the resources that they currently have. They're doing best. I mean, there's lots of times when we do something that we look back in a couple of hours and go, God, what was I thinking? That was just dumb. And it may have been, but that was your best thinking in that moment. So, yeah.
So one of the things that I notice about 2-year-olds is that they are not aware of what anybody else is doing, thinking, saying. They're in their own little bubble. I mean, of course, if you yell, they'll jump. But they're so connected with all of us that they don't need to pick your program apart and
Well,
this
and
is-
early, it doesn't seem like they have much of an awareness of my program.
Well, and I'm going back there to that point and saying, what needs do I have today that don't involve other people?
Mm.
It's like my mind is out there taking care of the world, right?
Yeah.
And then I come back and I say, so where are you and what do you need to do for yourself today? There you go. Do it.
I like that. And I would also invite you to just consider that they also don't have any awareness of separation.
Right,
That concept has not been introduced
right.
to them yet. So when they're looking at, like if I'm a baby and I'm looking at my hand, and then I change my perspective and I'm looking at Anne, there's no real difference
Right.
in that. And you know, they've done studies on our imagination, and one of my dad's friends was involved with it. My dad had a friend who was a POW with McCain in the Hanoi Hilton, and he passed the time playing golf in his mind. And he was in there for a long time, like 7 or 8 years. And he played like 3 or 4 rounds a day, and they just kept getting more complicated, and he kept getting himself in more trouble just for, you know, at first he plays the perfect round, but then he's imagining being off in the woods and hitting this incredible shot that brings him back. And for 7 or 8 years, he played golf 3 times a day at the Patrick Air Force Base golf course where he and my dad were stationed. And when he finally got released, he came and, you know, he was skin and bones. I think he weighed like about 117 pounds, and he's like 6'4" was. You know, so he's just absolutely skin and bones. Took him a while to get his strength back. In about 6 months, he finally went out and played golf. And he played the best round of his life ever, beat his previous best score by 7 strokes. And that was kind of big news. And they're like, wow, you know, how is that possible? And he kind of said off the cuff, he goes, I've been playing this course 3 times a day for the last 7 years. I don't know. I'm really kind of disappointed in my performance, to be honest with you. So, yeah, tomorrow.
I was just having this thought about how when we talk about children, we say, oh, children are so interesting, and babies, and oh, like there's something we've never been, right? And it's like what it would be like to imagine yourself in any part of your day saying, wow, you're integrating, like if you think of time, and they say that time is linear, but in the reality there is no time. It's circular, I guess, in the sense that it's all here right now. So your 2-month-old self is here with your 2-year-old self, is here with your 5-year-old self. And so imagine if you integrated all of that mental stuff into the moment, and you could say, I want to be my 2-year-old self in this moment and enjoy. So you're not thinking of the children as, oh, the children, oh, look at the children, but you are the child. And when you're interacting with the children, you can see them and understand them because you are saying, I am all these things. And so it's not like, I can't understand why they did that. You're like, I know exactly why they did that because that's exactly what I would do if I was 2 right now, you know, or something like that. And so it's not so foreign, but it could be a good exercise in meditation to bring yourself into that sense of joy instead of being, is to bring back yourself into yourself at an earlier date.
We actually have one of those on the website. I did that where I bounced people back in time all the way back to their youth, and then imagine bringing that with that idea of wonder and awe. And actually it's interesting when I'm doing coaching and hypnotherapy, I'll often ask people, you know, they'll give me an explanation and I'll say, well, that's what your head says. And I got that and that makes sense. What's your heart tell you? And more often than not, it's a different answer. What's your gut tell you? And I've recently started to say, what does infinite mind tell you? In my hypnosis, I'm not talking as much about the subconscious or unconscious as I am finite mind and infinite mind, and playing with that. Any other quick questions before I get the hook?
Well, I think we should give him a big hand because
Well,
that was
thank you very much.
amazing.